This is the Thriving Artist Podcast with Andrea Fleming, where we talk about how to go from surviving as an artist to thriving as an artist. Let's go. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. This is another interactive one, so get your pen and your journal. But before you do that, like, comment, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, leave a review or leave a, what are those things called? A rating. If you're on Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify, tell me how you're liking this. Let me know what you want to hear, what you want to see on the podcast. I'm happy to take requests. It's all about you. It's all about what you want to hear and what would help you. That's the whole reason I'm doing this. So please let me know. All right, let's jump in, because today we're talking about how to love your career and the process. Originally, I wrote this as two separate episodes, but this is kind of, both of these topics kind of go hand in hand to me. What I've noticed is it kind of all comes from the same place. So I thought I would just combine these two, especially because it's kind of hard to separate the two anyway. When you're talking about the process of building your career from our actual career itself, it's kind of hard to separate the two. So let's just talk about them together. Why not? This is going to be similar in format to the past couple of episodes, where we look at the experience that you might be having, what's causing the experience, or what's going on in your thinking, and also what the impact of that is and how you can change your thinking so that you can change the impact overall. So should we get started? Yes, we should. Let's do it. So here's what I noticed when it comes to not loving your career, what you might be experiencing. The top 4 things I noticed are usually looking down on your past successes or looking down on your CV, your resume, and not thinking that it is good enough, or looking around at your colleagues or other people in this industry and comparing and despairing, basically thinking where you're at is not good enough, right? I also notice, like, when you aren't loving your career, a very common experience is that you actually are auditioning a lot less, or you're auditioning for things that you're not auditioning for things that you really want to be auditioning for, right? Because you're thinking that what you have done is not good enough, or you're not loving your career at all. So you're just like kind of having a vendetta against the industry, which is not really hurting anybody but yourself. So I don't know why we do that when this happens. I mean, it's hurting the industry because they don't get to experience your art, but like, they don't know that they're missing out on you. So really the pain is really only being felt by you. And then because of these things, and just because of how you're thinking about it, you're having poor emotional health around the whole experience. So if you're not loving your career, check in with yourself. Are you noticing that you're comparing and despairing? Like, you're looking at your career and going, this is shit. I should be on tour, or I should be doing the cruise ship that they're doing, or I should be in that film. They shouldn't be in that film. Or maybe you're not thinking that they shouldn't even be doing it. You're thinking, of course they're in. I'll never get there. Which brings me to the process. Like, this is why I said these are so tied in together, because a lot of times our experience of our career is because we're not actually we're not experiencing the process in a way that's beneficial to us. So what the experience might feel like to you, if you're not enjoying the process, if you don't love the process and you don't enjoy your journey, is you're not doing enough auditions. Again, very similar experience. Or this is an interesting one, because I caught myself doing this early in my career. Either I was like skipping out on auditions, or I would do way too many auditions and burn out. And notice that this happens for people who are basically having the experience that, like, they don't love where they are in their process. They don't love the career that they've had. So they're trying to overcompensate, and they're trying to either prove to themselves or prove to other people that they're good enough to be where they want to be, or that it's possible for them to be where they want to be. So they do way too much. This was totally me. Not even that long ago, like maybe 4 years ago, doing just way too many auditions. Not being present or grateful for the gigs that you do book. So this is very similar, again, to looking down on your resume. You're also looking down on the present gigs that you have and thinking, this isn't good enough. I should be over there. I should be on that tour that they're doing. I should be much further along, right? And again, comparing and despairing. So notice how these are literally the same experience. Sometimes you can love your career, but still not really love the process, or vice versa. You can be okay with the process, but you still don't love your career. But most often, I notice that these go hand in hand. Usually, if you don't love your career, you're not loving the process. And if you're not loving the process, most likely you're not loving your career. So I want you to notice that, and of course, just like in other episodes, please go deeper into this. What else do you experience when you're not loving your career, when you're not loving your process? I think it just clues you into so much that can help you move past this. What I want you to notice, though, is at the root of both of these experiences are usually thoughts that have to do with not enoughness, or that have to do with, in general, insufficiency, like either insufficiency of where you are or where you think you could be, or insufficiency about your past. So the most common thoughts I notice when people aren't loving their career is they're thinking, I haven't done enough, I don't book enough, or my current gigs aren't good enough, right? And then the common thoughts I notice when primarily they're experiencing a resistance to their process, or they're not loving the process, is I'm never going to get to blank, whatever your future goal is, or I should be farther along. So all of these thoughts are rooted in insufficiency. I'm not good enough. What I'm doing is not good enough. What I did isn't good enough. And I'm never going to get to where I want to be. So again, not good enough. Like, it's like the career that I could have is not going to be good enough. What are some other thoughts that you notice that you have in regards to this topic? You're probably going to notice that they're variations of the thoughts that I just gave to you. It's usually along those lines, right? I can't think of too many other sub thoughts that it could be. You're probably thinking, well, I haven't booked Broadway yet, right? That's probably that's a really common thought in theater. Like, I haven't booked Broadway yet, which is another variation of the thought, I haven't done enough. Or I only booked one gig this year, or I only booked 2 gigs. That's another variation of the thought, I don't book enough. But just explore what's going on in your head when you're experiencing this resistance to the career that you have, or the process and the journey that you're on with your career. And just notice how, when these thoughts come up for you, how they make you feel. This is so important. I talk about this a lot because it's so important. We think that our behavior comes from our conscious thought, and we can influence our behavior through our conscious thought. But a lot of time, our behavior is coming from our feelings, our emotions, which are coming through our subconscious or unconscious thoughts, right? So we want to get to the place where we bring all of this to light and make it more conscious, make the feelings that we're feeling conscious, make the thoughts that are going through our head more conscious, so that we can adjust our behavior in a more productive way. So notice what it is you're feeling, because our feelings are what drive our action at the end of the day, right? I think what's that famous quote of like, we buy from our feelings and justify it with our thoughts, or something like that. That's so true. And that's true with all of our behavior, that our feelings drive our actions. Notice then what impulses come for those feelings in this specific circumstance. So if we know that our feelings drive our actions, what actions do you take when you're feeling this way about your career? And what do you want to do, right? And when I say, what do you want to do? I don't mean like when you're in a very good mood and you're inspired, what do you want to do? And that's where you make your goals from. No, because when you're in this place, you probably don't want to do those things. And how we know is because you don't do them, right? So like, when I'm inspired and I'm in love with my voice and I'm in love with my career and I think I'm the best actor in the world, I want to go do a bunch of auditions and I want to write a song and I want to do all this stuff. But when I am not in that place, and did you hear my dog snore? I don't know. I have background noise turned down, but like, she's so loud. Anyway, if you are not in that place, if I'm not in that place, normally what happens is I just want to play video games or look on my phone, or honestly, my favorite thing to do in the world is to play with my dog and to cuddle with her. Sometimes when I am in a low mood about my career, I don't even want to do that. I just want to sit on the couch and numb myself. So what is it that you want to be doing? genuinely in the moment when you're feeling this way. And then notice if you were prepping for an audition feeling that way, how would you show up and how would you behave? And what would your audition experience be like in general? And go deep with this, like not just when you're in the room, but before you go into the room, when you're meeting your colleagues, after you walk up, how do you greet the people behind the table? Right? These are questions that we asked on the past couple of episodes. And I encourage you to go back and listen to those because all of these topics kind of tie in together. And if I don't mention the questions here, more specific questions here, I definitely asked those on the other 2 episodes. So either way, it's going to be helpful. So just go deep and just notice the impact that thinking this way about your career has on you. Notice how after you've experienced all of that, it actually drives you further away from where you want to be, right? A lot of times we feel this way because we want to be somewhere else. We want to be on Broadway. We want to be doing TV and film. We want to be that series regular, or if you're an instrumentalist, like you want to be a pit player at the Met. Honestly, I don't freaking know what instrumentalists want to be doing. I used to be more in the instrumental world because I grew up playing violin, but I don't know what's going on in that world anymore. But you let me know what it is that you want to be doing in your career. There's a reason why we strive for these things. There's a reason we make goals, is because we actually want to create that experience for ourselves in our lives. And just notice how when you're in this place, you actually pull yourself away from that. Even if you feel like, okay, but I'm still showing up. Even though I feel this way, I'm still going to auditions. But what experience do you have when you're in that place? Are you showing up too much like I used to do and burning yourself out and not giving yourself enough time to prep because you're trying to do too much, trying to prove that you can be where you want to be? Are you showing up and you're just freaking out because you don't believe that you're good enough? Or you're pulling back because you don't believe it's going to be worth it because you're not going to book it anyway? How is that experience from you? And notice how that's leading to a result you don't want. Usually the result that we create for ourselves is that we book less of what we want, or we don't book more of what we want. We stay exactly where we are, or sometimes we even like take steps backward, right? We may even book less gigs because we're getting so caught up in the things that we don't have. Take one of those reasons, one of those thoughts, one of the not enough thoughts, one of the insufficient thoughts. Maybe my gigs aren't enough. My gigs aren't good enough. And we're going to imagine that it's actually the opposite. So when I started doing this work, when I was thinking, and I had all of these thoughts. And it's common that like we don't have just one thought. That can happen, but most likely we have multiple thoughts, and a lot of us have all of these thoughts, or a good number of these thoughts. I had all of them. That's how I know this so well. But I had the thought, my gigs aren't good enough. And I remember this so clearly, being in this phase of my career of thinking that my gigs aren't good enough and that I should be farther along. Because I remember I used to have conversations with my sister about it, and she would be like, are you freaking crazy? Because there's things that you're doing right now that 90% of performers everywhere wish they could be doing, and you're doing it and you're thinking that it's not good enough. And the way that and she was absolutely right. Now that I look back at it, and I'm like, what's crazy is anytime in my career that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, I always ended up booking at kind of the highest level. Like the first and only time I ever worked at a theme park, I booked with Disney Hong Kong. Like that's kind of like the upper echelon of theme parks. And she used that example. She would like say that to me. She'd be like, you always book at the highest level. So I don't understand what the issue is. But I would show up and I would think that way. And because I would think that way, like, oh, what I'm doing now isn't good enough, or all of the gigs that I booked before aren't good enough, and I should be further along, I would show up in the mindset that I was unqualified to be at the places that I was auditioning for. So I would go to an audition for the thing that I wanted to be doing, which was probably Broadway, or most likely back then that was my number one thing, was to audition for Broadway. I would show up for like a Hamilton audition or something like that. And I would think that I wasn't qualified to be there, because I would be like, oh, they're looking at my resume and they think that, oh, she worked at a theme park and she hasn't really done Broadway before. So they're going to be thinking that I'm not good enough. So I would either try to prove that I was good enough and overdo it, over sing, shout in my auditions when I was belting, push too hard, get super tense, or I would pull way back thinking that I wasn't worthy enough to be there. And I wouldn't be, I'm talking specifically about singing, like I wouldn't support my singing. It would be super lackluster. I wouldn't be acting in my audition at all. It was just either really boring or really disastrous. And so the result that I created is that I didn't create more of the gigs that I actually wanted. And so it would prove to myself, I would prove to myself that what I was doing wasn't good enough, that the gigs that I was getting wasn't good enough. Isn't that insane? Like, I made this up in my head that what I was doing wasn't good enough. And because I made that up in my head, I actually proved it to myself and created more of what wasn't good enough in my mind. It's really bizarre how we do this to ourselves. We really do be creating our own reality here. And I think it's so important for us to see that, because that's where we have the power to change it. So I want you to go through a similar example of going to the opposite end of the spectrum. Oh, I didn't even tell you my opposite end of the spectrum. Hold on a minute. Rewind. So now I just get ahead of myself. I think that I tell you things that I actually don't. So now that I'm in this place where I don't think that about myself, I actually am so appreciative of the jobs that I do have. And of course, I'm striving to get to the next level of where I want to be. I absolutely want to still be on Broadway. I'm an ambitious person. I always want to see what I can do. Always want to stretch myself, but I by no means look down on the jobs that I do get or the jobs that I do have now. I think it's so badass, the resume that I've built for myself and the opportunities that I get. Like right now I'm working off Broadway at this cool musical called The Jerusalem Syndrome, which by the time this comes out, you will have a chance to see it. So buy your tickets.